Hello, and welcome to Impacto AZ, a podcast dedicated to centering Latinx voices on the important issues of the day. I'm Jonathan Higuera, your podcast host, and here along with my two co-hosts, Juan Rodriguez, who is also our executive producer. Hello, Juan. And David Lopez, a distinguished professor of practice at Arizona State University's Law School. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I should also say these two guys could have a podcast on their own and the things they're doing. And David, you recently launched the initiative for civil rights, migration, and workplace law. Before we get started with our guests, just tell us quickly how that's going.
No, it's going great. We've had many big name guests. We're going to host the president of the American Bar Association to talk about the importance of judicial independence and the rule of law. I think we all know in the immigration space, there's been an issue in terms of federal compliance with judicial orders, and it really has reached a crisis point. And so we're going to sort of work our way through that with one of the experts. And then we also launched our podcast, Derechos y Esperanza, and we've had many national figures and many local figures that are helping us remember lost histories in the Southwest. So it's great.
Yes, and thank you for letting me be part of a couple of those podcasts. It was very informative and learning, and I learned a lot on those.
We help each other out, my brother.
That was great.
You know that.
That's right. That's right.
I think Juan knows Teresa, but we co-host each other's podcasts. So I brought him on to with Juan Cartagena, who was the president of Latino Justice for 10 years. And so we talked about a lot of the big cases involving Latinos, and then he always has me on to do whatever I add, which I'm not sure what it is, but we'll figure it out.
Okay. Well, that's a good segue introducing our guest today. Our guest today is Teresa Puente. She is a professor, a journalism professor at Cal State University at Long Beach. Welcome, Teresa. You've also had a distinguished career in journalism, working at some of the major newspapers in our country. And the one that I'm most proud of, you worked at the Chicago Tribune, it looks like the Chicago Sun-Times and other newspapers. But the one I'm most proud of, my favorite, is the Hispanic Link Weekly Report, where we both worked in Washington, D.C. So thank you for joining us today.
That's right. Well, thank you for having me.
Right. So tell us, before we get started into the issues and before we start talking about Bad Bunny and other things, what's on your plate these days? What big projects are you working on? What are you embedded in?
Thanks for having me. So I work as a journalism professor at Cal State Long Beach, and really proud that I created the first bilingual journalism class there, training next generation Latinx journalists to cover our community, and I can't think of a more important time to do that. And very much following in the footsteps of everything that our mentor, Charlie Erickson, taught us at Hispanic Link, where Jonathan mentioned that we both got early starts in our career in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely, yes. And I remember talking to you at the National Association of Hispanic Journalism Conference in Chicago, your hometown, in which you were sharing with me that you helped launch and found a bilingual magazine for students. How's that project going?
Yeah, that's great. Actually, we're reviewing stories that we're going to publish. So we are the only bilingual publication in Long Beach, California, which is in Los Angeles County. And I'm really proud of that. You know, unfortunately, we're seeing decline in a lot of mainstream media, particularly local newspapers. So our student media, not just the bilingual publication we have, but our student newspaper and our other projects really serve as a vital news source for our local community here. And really proud that with my students, we started a bilingual publication. We also have a website and active social media, but we publish a print publication once a semester. So at the moment, we're reviewing stories for consideration, and that will come out in March.
Do you feel that you're interested in the industry, interested in pursuing careers in the media, or or not? I was just curious what you're seeing.
Well, in general, there are some journalism schools that are seeing low enrollments. I taught for almost 10 years at Columbia College Chicago, and sadly, when I was there, we were a standalone journalism department, and today it's just a concentration within communication major, and majority of the faculty are no longer there. So I guess my heart breaks to hear that. But here at Cal State Long Beach, our classes are like 97% full. We have a really strong journalism program, and the magazine that I started, which is called Enye, a play on the and then with the tilde, sort of a phonetic pronunciation of that to sort of represent like our names and our identity and our pride in not allowing that to be changed. And so I have about 20 to 25 students who work on this project every semester, which is bigger than a lot of local newsrooms. And so here at Cal State Long Beach, our journalism classes are full, and students still understand the importance of journalists to, one, defend democracy, and two, to report on underserved communities. And that's really what I'm about and teaching about as well. So I'm very encouraged that we still see a lot of interest in our program, but there are other journalism programs around the country that are unfortunately seeing a decline in enrollment.
Well, thank you for your commitment to, that's been our goal from the very beginning, right? To help make our newsrooms more diverse, to create better representation in the media. That's from my very days in college. That's what we were trying to do. It's so heartening to see you stick with that goal and continue to try and make that a reality, because in these days of fragmented media, I don't know what it's going to take to have that representation, but I do know with tools like we're using today, a podcast that's going on YouTube channel, hopefully there's more opportunities and fewer gatekeepers to keep us from telling our stories. And speaking of stories, we like to ask our guests a little bit about themselves personally and their personal journey to where they're at now. Like where you're from, where were you born, what were some of the markers in life that led you down this professional path? Why don't you share with us a little bit about your story?
Thank you for asking that. Well, I identify as a Chicana from Chicago, even though I'm in Southern California now, and I've been out here almost 10 years. My heart's still always in Chicago. Many people don't realize, especially, those who aren't from the Midwest, that Chicago is more than 30% Latinx. We have a significant Mexican community, so my family is Mexican American. My parents are Tex-Mex, and both their families, for different reasons, moved to Chicago in the 1950s. My mom's family, they were farm workers, and that's what brought them to the Midwest, picking different crops, and they wound up at a tomato farm outside Chicago, and my mom was the youngest, and her older sisters convinced the parents, let's just stay here, and instead of farm work, we'll segue to factory work. And so they did, and my mom was the youngest, so she's the only one who got to go to high school. And I think about the importance of my mom graduating high school and how that was like pivotal for me in my educational journey. And then also, as it turns out, it's a little side story, but my mom went back to college in middle age, and she and my big sister graduated from college the same year in 1980. So, being growing up in Chicago too, my parents were always super active and working on community issues. One example, we went to a local Catholic church, and they asked the priest there, why don't we have Mass in Spanish? And as the story was told to me, at first the priest was like, we're not really interested in that. And then my parents were like, well, then I guess you're just going to lose a bunch of parishioners. So then they won, and they started Mass in Spanish. And so on all these ways, my parents have been advocates for the community. My mom is been a member of LULAC for 50 plus years, and I'm actually to say I was just in Chicago. We celebrated her 89th birthday And she's already
Oh,
making plans to go
yay.
to another LULAC conference this summer. So my mom's super active, and they've
And your
always
sister
been.
also
Uh,
has made quite a name for herself too, right?
oh yeah, my sister has her own legacy. She recently retired. She was the CEO and one of the founders of the Latino Policy Forum in Chicago, advocating for the community on a range of issues from education to immigration and health and beyond. I mean, you really should get her on the show.
Yeah,
My big sister and very wise, and
you can help me
has
with
made a
that.
huge
I'd love to have
impact.
her on this show. I'd love to have her.
Yeah.
I
So
count on
my
Juan to get
my
us all our
roots.
Chicago guests, but he doesn't always come through,
That's
Juan.
right.
So your help would be appreciated. Oh, thank you for sharing that. So we hope that those retelling of your own personal narrative inspires people who watch this show, and especially young people. So we like it to hear those stories. And we're here today to really talk about Bad Bunny and beyond. So here we are, 9 days after the Super Bowl performance. I know I was on a high for the first week after, but here we are. We've had a little bit more time to digest it and to get a feel for what the long term or lingering impact of his performance might be. And I know David has done a podcast or two on this, and we have too. And so I just didn't want to let the moment pass without doing more on Bad Bunny. And I'm so glad you're able to share. And I noticed you did a nice piece for Latino News Network, I believe it's called, Teresa. And I thought, oh, I'm going to invite Teresa to come on this show and share with us some of her thoughts on
Yeah.
Bad Bunny. So how are you feeling
So
now, 9 days after that epic
I'm
performance?
I'm still like elated and overjoyed to have witnessed that, as I think millions and millions of people are around the country, regardless of their background. I'm still, my social media feeds are clearly based on an algorithm, so I'm still getting like daily posts and reactions to it from not just the diverse Latino, Latina, Latinx community, but from people of all backgrounds. To me, and I wrote that piece in Latino News Network, and it was also published in the Fulcrum. And the editor I worked with, the Balta, the former president of NHJ. Just want to
Oh,
mention
really?
that. What I really wanted to focus on it was really a, the joy that we needed for the times that we're in. It was like a validation of our community. It was a history of Puerto Rico, but it was much bigger than that. It was I think people of all different Latino backgrounds saw themselves in there, and there was quite a bit of Latinx diversity in every part of that. And so it was about our showing the world our our community with pride. It was about resistance and resilience. But I think the main thing I focused on was the message that Bad Bunny said too. We're all American. The idea that America is just the United States is very narrow and ignorant, really. I loved how Bad Bunny named all the countries in the Americas and the islands and the Caribbean, and that we're all American. And I think that was really the most important message of it all.
I think you're right, and we have dissected some of that with both on David's podcast, and he helped us in the pre-performance digest some of why this performance was a smart move by the NFL, why this performance showcased multilingual diversity in our country, and why it was the right time to have Bad Bunny. But what we didn't know is how for at least from my perspective, how entertaining it would be. I mean, just to be able to listen to some good beats. And admittedly, I don't know Spanish well enough to know what every lyric, what he was saying at all times, but I could feel it. I could feel the music, and made me want to get out of my seat, especially when I listened to it again, when I could hear it more closely. So. What was I'm interested to hear my co-host takes on it too. I know, David, you've spent a lot of time breaking it down with
Yeah.
others.
Yeah, I mean, I would like focus on three different levels. I'd focus on, the really granular level. I'd focus on sort of the medium range level, and then I'd focus on really almost the broad emotional level, right? So at the granular level, I think the show's going to be analyzed for many years to come because there were so many texts in that show that just kind of keep coming forward. Like there were the three Puerto Rican muses. We haven't talked about that. There were the different people in the bushes. There was the mariachi divas, whether they're from LA or from Tucson, and there was just so many like very small details that were really a homage, I think, to various Latinx communities across the country. That I think people are just going to keep going through this. And each time you go through it, it's almost like great literature. You're going to just be able to pick up something else and something that's special. So I really kind of appreciated doing, our podcast recap because we had people that were there on the ground in Rio Piedras, in the diaspora, and then fans that didn't grow up with the music but have come to love it, and then sort of the middle-aged Chicanos, and we all sort of approached it differently and saw different things. But I just think at the granular level, there's going to be a lot that's still there that probably the four of us, as much as we've thought about it, still haven't seen and haven't appreciated. I mean, details, obviously that have been commented on in terms of the color of the blue on the flag as a representation of Puerto Rican independence. The shout out to the Puerto Rican Social Club in New York, and just Jessica Alba and Karol G, and even people hiding in the bushes that are really famous, that were like sort of the tree in the elementary school. And then
The
at the medium
Mandalorian
level,
was in the house for sure.
yep, a lot of people, and I think even at the medium level, I think this is about sort of an elevation of the story of Puerto Rico, and really kind of uplifting its ongoing colonial status, and really kind of opening up a conversation about Puerto Rico in relationship, to the metropole, to the as a colonized community, but also as a community that has contributed so much worldwide, to culture. And I got back from Medellin in the summer, and there's Puerto Rican flags all over Medellin. I'm like, why are there Puerto Rican flags? Bad Bunny, hello, right? And just really the sort of the influence of Puerto Rican culture, but the ability to, I think, catalyze a conversation about the fact that Puerto Rico is the last colony on Earth, and that people, understandably don't like this sort of idea of being like foreign in a domestic sense, and that they either need to kind of assert the independence, which sounds like where Bad Bunny is, or they need to take another route. And so that's the medium level. But I think the broad level is for all of us, like all of us on this call, and people across the country and people across the world, Latinos, that are almost like intentionally and being systematically excluded from, belonging in various communities, belonging in our national political community, and facing so much, I think, overt hatred and institutional violence, that the fact that, we were on center stage, like this is all like a gut thing, but it's like for those 13 minutes, like we belonged, like we were the world, right? And to see the reaction of allies outside of the community, and all the memes about, yo soy de Canadá, de Toronto, right? And just see, Deberí tirar más fotos in Japanese, and just see all of that, just to see how we were, in this period of like just really intense state violence and hostility towards our community, and really towards Latin America generally, sort of the reassertion of, what they call the Don Road Doctrine, but sort of this idea that people in Latin America cannot govern themselves. This was a moment where we were center stage, and that was very much of an emotional reaction that people felt. And it's not just Spanish speaking, right? I think, we talked about, the shout out to Haiti, the shout out to Jamaica, to Jamaica, the shout out to the Afro-Latino experiences, that all these communities that even within, within the hemisphere, often face hostility within their own countries, that this was just very much about the inclusion of people that have been almost like systematically marginalized and just subject to just kind of mind-boggling state violence, and the fact that we can just sort of joy, and that we can embrace the joy. The party became the resistance, and I just think that's really the big picture. Like, this is not like the us microanalyzing who was in the bush or the color of the flag. This is just sort of the emotional response of like belonging, like we belong.
Right.
And I don't
At the time when we feel like, as you just said, that we're communities under siege. So the timing of this couldn't have been better. Teresa, you've covered a lot of, you've been following a lot of what's going on in the country right now with the ICE siege, the deportations, the kidnappings. Did you feel that the way we are right now, what's going on right now, really made Bad Bunny's performance that much more important or meaningful? Do you think the climate that it was performed
in? Because absolutely, it like I said, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of violence happening right now against the community, and this was joyful. But I think that, and it's in my own community. I'm in well, obviously my hometown, Chicago, was under ICE invasion this past summer.
Beat it back.
And that's like one of the things I want to maybe pivot to, is just the power of resistance and getting involved. Like, look at how the blocks, block by block, around the schools organized. In Chicago, that was an incredible example of people working to protect their community. The resistance in Minnesota is just inspiring, and obviously the tragedy. But one thing that I wanted to highlight, it wasn't just Alex Preti and Renee Good that were killed. We had a woman shot 5 times in Chicago and miraculously survived, and then a Latino man killed in Chicago under really similar circumstances to Renee Good, and those didn't make the national headlines. And then the 30+ people who died in ICE detention last year, and the thousands of children who are and people who just are living in unsanitary, inhumane conditions. Our government is doing this. And so I hope that beyond the joy, people can use this moment to think about how you can help, because it's very real. I'm in Long Beach, California. The car wash 3 blocks from my campus was raided the week before the class started. Before Thanksgiving, a church 3 blocks from where I live. So just as a brown woman, driving around, I get nervous sometimes. And I was recently near San Diego with some family members who were visiting, and I was driving to the grocery store to pick up some things. I was by myself, and I noticed a black unmarked vehicle with dark tinted windows on my tail. I panicked. I called my sister on speakerphone, and I'm like, stay with me. Because, the fact that, and I am 4th generation in this country, that I have to worry that I could be taken, and who would witness? Who would know? This is the reality, so I called my sister who was visiting me, and I stayed on the phone until luckily when I pulled into the grocery store parking lot, the car kept going. But I feel pretty certain that was an ICE vehicle because, just it had all the appearances of it.
How scary is that?
But even if it wasn't, like, well, you know what I do? This was my mom's suggestion. I'll tell a little anecdote about my mom in a minute, but I carry a passport card in my wallet. It was my mom's suggestion when I renewed my passport, actually during Trump 1. She's like, you can order a passport card with your new passport, and so I do have it in my wallet.
Good.
And
it's unfortunate you have to.
But why should I have to? Well, I only have to because I am a visibly brown woman. But yet, right. That is again the message of Bad Bunny. We're here. We've always been here. This is our country, as well.
Yeah, we reclaim America. Teresa, it's great to see you. I'm sorry you have to jump. I'd rather do this than what I have to do. But you know,
Well,
you
David,
know,
we know what you're doing is really connecting the law school with our community and all
Important.
the stuff that's going on here in Phoenix. So we appreciate that you're here and doing that, and hopefully it's going to be a outstanding success because we need it. We
thank
really do need those connections
thank
between
you.
the
Teresa, you're
academy
next.
and the community.
All right. Bye. Bye, you guys.
Okay. All right. Take care. So, you know, another interesting facet of this to me is that both you and Juan was raised in the Chicago area. Uh, Teresa, you were raised in Chicago. So that is really a diverse community that, in terms of the Latino representation, right? I was always told that Chicago most reflects the demographics of the Latino community nationwide. And so you grew up with strong Puerto Rican communities and other communities alongside the Mexican American community. So did you get the references to Bad Bunny? Did you understand that a lot more, say, than these more homogenous Mexican American communities like where I'm from here in Phoenix? Do you think that helped you see the nuggets that were being presented, the cultural nuggets that were coming out during that performance?
Yes. Uh, I think in regards to Chicago, I've always, to myself, I've always considered Chicago to be, as far as Latino awareness or Latino identity, Chicago is the cultural, financial, industrial center of the Latino experience in the Midwest, and even beyond now. The there's a reason why the uh, Mexican Fine Arts Museum is called the National Mexican Fine Art Museum, because its reach and scope is far beyond Chicago. So I'm always make it a point to assert Chicago's place, not so much dominance, but place in the Latino experience here in the United States. Um, but but in regard to John's reference to a homogeny Latino community like Phoenix, that in part's true. But I think around the '80s and '90s that started shifting. I'm coming across Puerto Rican communities in Denver and in San Antonio, and a lot of it has to do with the Air Force and other military families that they move somewhere, they relocate, and they like it there. El Paso is one of these communities that has a significant other Mexican Latino community, and and you'll find the Latino presidents from Fairbanks, Alaska, all the way to parts of Alabama, and because I've met and talked to people, they tell me where they're from, and my wife was raised in Fairbanks, Alaska. She was born in Merida, but her experience was that of Alaskan. So and the strife there, the challenge for Latinos in that part of the country, and like in Alaska and other places, is finding other Latinos to identify, regardless of what nation they're from. And so and I'm excited to go back to Chicago. I'm going back to Chicago on Monday. This coming Monday, I'm going to be there for about 10 days or so, visiting family. But I'm also eager to see how it's been. I've been going back often. I've been going back every 2 or 3 months to visit my mother. She's getting older. She's going to be 82. Going back for her birthday as well. But I worry about the story you just told us, Teresa, is frightening. And I worry about my daughter. She lives in near Belmont and Harlem. It was a historically Italian neighborhood, and it transitioned into a Polish neighborhood. Now it's transitioning to a multi-generational Latino community. And my daughter has like a 2-minute walk to the bus stop when she goes in the morning to get to work, and I worry about that walk every morning.
Because
in the area.
ICE did withdraw the surge, but it doesn't mean they're still not present, right?
Right.
What are your contacts telling you in Chicago about ICE activity there?
Yeah, and we don't talk about it openly because I don't want to. One, I don't want to be the helicopter parent, even though she's in her 20s now, and burden her with "How are you? Are you okay? Are you safe?" But she texts me every morning, when she's on her way to work, and she'll text me when she gets at work. So she knows I worry about her. But the fact is, like Teresa said, why, it's sad that we have to go through this. It's sad that we have to be this cognizant about something that millions of Americans don't have to deal with every day. And I think I've told this story to some of my other friends about the passport. I got my passport decades ago, but I've always carried it with me because I've never trusted or had any confidence in INS back in the day, and now ICE or any of those three-letter agencies. I just never had any confidence because even under Democratic presidents, there was still hostility. There was still violence against our community. I recall raids in the Midwest at some of the meatpacking communities, like in Iowa and Illinois. ICE would just roll into, what's happening now is not new. It's been going on. It's going on at a bigger scale. Disappearing people, separating family. That's been going on since the 80s, 90s, and
That's right. Workplace raids are not a new phenomenon.
Right. And yeah.
What might be new is the level, the lack of due process. I don't
right.
The level of it. What do you think, Teresa?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I want to acknowledge too that I think we're seeing an escalation, especially in the interior. But Democrats helped build this ICE enforcement industry and complex.
Yes.
Let's not forget that Obama was is the deporter in chief. That partly was because they started counting how they deported people that had been detained previously at the border and just immediately sent back, weren't originally always put in the tally. So that's partly why Obama's numbers were so high. And also, Obama didn't push forth any kind of comprehensive immigration reform. He did create DACA, which has helped a lot of undocumented students, but who are now currently, and undocumented young people are now currently at risk. But, the Democrats helped build some of this. We just had a bunch of them, vote to continue funding ICE. So it is a bipartisan issue. There's blame on both sides, but to acknowledge the moment we're in, I would say it is escalated. And there, when, I never really had to worry for my own safety and as a U.S. citizen, and I think it's definitely different. It's definitely different. It's more intense. And also now we're seeing U.S. citizens being shot and killed. Like we've not seen that before. So it's definitely escalated. And I was starting to talk about. Go ahead.
No, and I was just going to say, yes, Obama. There were millions deported under Obama. Yes, but I don't know if we saw the complete lack of due process and kind of the inhumane handling of how this went down. I can't say I was on top of it reporting on it, but I don't believe you were seeing as much of the lack of respect for legal guidelines. I'm thinking of the woman who was on her way to visit her parents in Texas after she received her diploma in Massachusetts, and was here legally, was awaiting the process for legalization, and was deported. And now the judge is ordering them to bring her back. They still haven't. Those kind of cases are the ones that show that this is a different level of.
It is different.
Violence.
We're seeing they're ignoring the rule of law. They're ignoring due process. Many canceling TPS, not allowing in people applying for asylum or refugee status, detaining people that do have a pathway. But part of what the bigger problem is that we still, not since Reagan in 1986 have we had any comprehensive immigration reform. The system itself is broken. I sometimes say to my students, like, if I am a green card holder from Mexico and I want to sponsor my brother, how long does it take? Do you guys know how long does it take to bring in
I'm going to guess 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that.
15 to 20 years, and you can look up State Department waiting periods. In fact, years ago in Chicago, I interviewed a woman who was like, yeah, my brother was trying to sponsor me, but it was a 15-year wait, so I came anyway because she had to work. But if I'm from France and I want to sponsor my brother, how long is it going to take?
A lot sooner.
Yeah, 1 year, around 1 year, because of the quotas we have, right? And so our system fundamentally is broken. But now what we're seeing is that people who are actually following these rules that are super complicated and not the same for everybody. We have, we had a green card lottery, and like people from Ireland were eligible. It was actually Kennedy who started that, the late Senator Kennedy. So like just the system itself is broken, and people, I think, don't understand that it's just not like get in line, because for some people there is no line. There is no line. I would say waiting 15 to 20 years is not actually a line. But the people who are eligible, you have to be eligible to get in line. Now we're seeing those people being detained. I just heard an audio interview with a man from Ireland who's been in ICE detention for months.
Yes.
He's married to a U.S. citizen. He should be fast-tracked to get a green card. That is actually the fastest way to get a green card, and now he's being detained and described just unsanitary, unhumane conditions, saying he hadn't been outside in like only a handful of times in a few months. So this is just inhumane treatment. So, I do want to acknowledge, like, the Democrats helped build this system, and some of them are still supporting it. We need them to be more courageous. but it's just this administration. They're not just ignoring the law with regard to immigration. I mean, there's been so many violations of law and undoing of policies. And it just and they're just so much anti-democratic action. So they're doing it across the board.
Do you have your students cover these kinds of things? Are they researching them and turning them into stories?
Yeah,
Doing?
Absolutely they are. We our last issue, we had a student, one of our local car washes have been raided. One of our students went to the car wash and interviewed business owners and people for how that's impacted. But I want to say this too, like, in terms of our responsibility as journalists, like, we can't ignore the story. But when I also ask my students, like, what percentage of Latinos are U.S. citizens? Most of them have no idea that on average it's 80%. So if 80% of us are U.S. citizens, and that up the other 10% who are legal permanent residents, less than 10% of our community is undocumented. But yet that is the only way we're being portrayed in the media. And that has been my issue and my problem. I've had a problem with that. Not just this administration, but as always, like the media, mainstream media framing around our community is as being undocumented. But if 90% of us are citizens or legal permanent residents, I ask my students, is that an accurate portrayal? Obviously it's not. So what I'm trying to teach my students is culturally competent reporting. We can't ignore the headlines and the immigration issue, but it's really important for us to tell stories of our community as educators, as business owners, as entrepreneurs, as professors. Like, how often, I'm a Latina professor, but how often do you see somebody like me interviewed or quoted in the news, right? How often do you see Latino business owners interviewed and quoted in the news? So I'm also, we cover immigration, but we don't let that just be the only thing we report on.
Right.
Like right now, I have a few students, yeah.
Which is why we created this podcast, actually. That was foremost on our mind, that, we don't have to wait for traditional media to be the gatekeeper, to start interviewing some of these knowledgeable, expert Latinas on subjects that we know they can speak to, like we're doing right now with you. So we're trying to use the technology to create space for this, because, as you know, we've waited a long time to find that voice in other mediums and other media, and it really hasn't happened to the extent we want. Of course, we know media has fragmented and changed, but still, if we have an opportunity to create a space for these kind of interactions, we need to.
I want to say too, like, a lot of people are distrustful of media. I think we have to be more discerning. If you're just watching the talking head shows, you're not, that's a glimpse. but most of the people on those shows aren't even journalists, right? They're just political, partisan people. I was trying to be polite, but and I watch some of those shows too to find out what they're talking about. But they're still really important. People say journalism is dying. It's changing, but like just look at the work of ProPublica on the work that they did on the children in detention and getting the letters of the children. Like that's just one example of a really, really important piece of journalism. And so you have a lot of a move towards independent and nonprofit journalism, where I think some of the best journalism is happening. And so I just want to, because
give
I think
a shout
what this
out to independent journalists.
And to nonprofit journalism, and even in mainstream and some of the big publications, like the Times or the Post, unfortunately, which had horrible layoffs recently. There's still some really amazing journalists trying to tell complicated, nuanced stories, and hold government and the powers that be accountable, which is the role of the Fourth Estate. So I have not lost faith in journalism. If what concerns me is like the propaganda and distrust of journalists has grown because of the current president's propaganda. We're not the enemy of the people. We're defenders of democracy. And so part of what we have to learn to do is there's a professor at Berkeley, retired Professor George Lakoff, who has written a lot of incredible books, but one of the things he talks about is sort of flipping the script. Instead of enemies of the people, reframe it, defenders of democracy, and to not repeat some of the language of the propaganda. So it's, I tell my students, the New York Times, which is not perfect at all, but it is not fake news. If so, they'd be getting sued all the time, and they have been sued, but they haven't they haven't lost, at least not yet. So I think it's really the role of journalism is still really, really, it's essential to this time, and I'm grateful that I can, at least so far, still write opinion pieces and not worry about being jailed. We have seen some journalists, Don Lemon among them, being arrested for covering a protest. That's horrible that ever happened. But I also have confidence. I probably have the most confidence in the judicial system right now to uphold the laws and defend our freedom of speech, our freedom of assembly, and basically just our civil rights.
The Supreme Court notwithstanding?
Yeah, lower courts, I don't know.
Yeah,
the Supreme Court, it's a mess.
Yeah, that's another piece of work. That's a podcast we have to devote ourselves to as well. No, I hear what you're saying. It's just that we've interviewed some independent journalists on this podcast, and what becomes apparent is without that corporate backing, that institutional backing, it's a very tough hill to climb for them. Right off, they lose the salary that was established in benefits, and they're tapping into subscription models, and I applaud them, and I want to support them, and I realize that it's just maybe some of them that are starting, that maybe got out at a time, that are younger, that don't have the financial resources to carry themselves, they're really going to have a tough time going down that path. But that's why we need to step up and support them, subscribe to their Substacks or whatever you can to donate to keep them
I
going.
want to just share something about that. I can't even count how many support a couple public radio stations, in Chicago and LA, and the different newspapers and nonprofit newsrooms that I support, to encourage everybody to support local journalism, and one of the other podcasters I follow, Professor Galloway, has a campaign going on about unsubscribing, and the power of canceling some of your subscriptions to the corporations that are basically enabling this current administration. It's called Resist and Unsubscribe. You can find more about it. And it's really, I unsubscribed to a few places yesterday. It's
Big tech?
challenging.
Same here.
No,
Did you give it?
corporations. So
Okay.
like Apple News, which I had been subscribing to for convenience, but I unsubscribed to that and to Uber, like corporations that are enabling and funding this current administration. And so that's just one way of protesting. Like, well, you can go to protest, you can unsubscribe to corporations that support policies that you don't support, and you can organize. And so I've also been working with my local union, and I'm part of a Latinx faculty and staff group on campus. We've done Know Your Rights workshops, and we're organizing to protect our community. And so I just encourage people, the sentiment might be overwhelm, for people to lose faith and throw up their hands and say, I can't do anything, but there are things you can do, from donating to different community groups, to unsubscribing to the corporate entities that are supporting this administration, to protesting, to organizing, to helping. Like one of the community groups that I've done Know Your Rights training with, they also deliver food to people who are afraid to leave their homes. So there are so many ways that people can get involved. So that's what I would say. Like, think locally. Like, don't despair. It's very easy to despair. Just reading the headlines every day is heartbreaking. And but there's a lot we can do in small and big ways. And so I just want to really emphasize that for people to think about, how can I support, and to start local in doing that.
Absolutely.
Find out what organizations and nonprofits are helping in your community, and you could just start there.
And that's why Bad Bunny's performance, in my mind, was so critical and epic, and couldn't have been timed better, because the stream of anxiety and attacks on our community, and we just needed to hear someone help us reaffirm what we already knew, that we're here, we've been here, we contribute, we're givers, and we're part of the reason this great American experiment is a success. And we have to tell ourselves that if no one else is going to bring it up, right?
And at the end of the day, I want to quote the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who passed away today. Like, I am somebody. They can't erase us. They are trying to erase us, to deport people in our community, but we are a strong, millions strong community, and there's a lot of pain and suffering going on right now, but they cannot erase us. They can't. And we're here, we're Americans. We've always been here on this continent. Many of us have indigenous roots. Most of us have indigenous roots. We've always been on this continent. Right. And so there are powerful people at work, enforcing policies that are rooted in white supremacy, and they're becoming bolder and bolder about saying this. The guy who was testifying before Congress just last week, like, just not being afraid to spout white supremacist views. But we are, as a community, strong, and we can't forget our power and our voice and what we can do together. And not just us. I think what Minnesota shows is that we have allies, right? The majority of the people protesting in Minnesota were white. Let's be honest.
Right.
Thank goodness, people. We need everybody who believes in equality and justice to do something. It's not just our fight. It's a fight for humanity. And so
we are in a fight. We definitely are in a fight.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I think if you have any final thoughts, we're about to wrap this up. So, Juan, if you have anything you want to add, and then we're going to say bye, and hopefully we'll be able to get Teresa on the show again sometime.
Yeah, and Teresa thank you for being here. You're doing great work. I wish we had 1,000 of you doing the work that you're doing. It's always great to see and talk to you. And then in closing with Bad Bunny, I think what we saw with Bad Bunny is what he did in those 13, 14 minutes was a masterpiece. How he condensed all that messaging, all that art, all that music in such a short period of time for maximum effect. I think it's a fixed point in time. It's going to be one of those things where 20 years from now, people are going to say, "Where were you when Bad Bunny was on the stage at the Super Bowl?" And it's going to. I think it's inspirational. It's going to be long lasting. And I think that was the biggest pushback our community has had to this administration. And I think it's one of those things that is going to just garner more momentum. So I'm just glad that.
Up.
Yeah.
If we meet the moment.
Yeah.
You
But
know,
again,
as
Teresa,
Thank
but again,
you.
real quick, thank you for doing the work you do with the next generation of journalists.
Yeah, you know,
Absolutely.
you said you wish there were 1,000 of me. I've definitely trained more than 1,000 journalism students in my career. So like, I'm definitely paying it forward and elevating and training people to do important journalism. And and just sort of ending with Bad Bunny, his message. I'm sure that's going to be his performance, the subject of books, PhD thesis. There's so much to unpack there. Um, but one thing important in Chicago was really a center for the Puerto Rican independence movement. That's also when I was at the Chicago Tribune. It was during the Clinton administration, and some of the independentistas were released from prison. And I covered that and other stories on the Puerto Rican community. So there's history and story is part of our American history and story, and I think that as diverse Latinx communities, like we can learn from each other, and work more together. And so Bad Bunny's message is just like, again, we're all American, and we're here, and we're not going anywhere.
Absolutely. And with that, I think we'll have to wrap this show up. It's been an honor. And if you liked the content we are bringing you today, please like and subscribe to our channel. That is the only way we're going to be able to continue to create this space for the type of perspectives we're bringing you here at Impacto AZ. So with that, thank you to my guests, thank you to my co-hosts, and you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, guys.